Beep.
What's a false start in radio or
Yeah.
TV? Hey, everybody, it's Freeology Friday. I am Aaron Tomlinson, and he is...
Derrick Day.
How you doing, Derrick?
Man, I'm doing excellent. I'm doing 10 times better now that I see you.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
It's
What
good
do
to
you
have
got?
you back.
What do you got in the glass? Yeah, it's good to be back.
Man, simple tonight, just ye old fashioned.
All right. Well, I am doing a Dublin old fashioned, and I told you in the green room, I guess,
Yeah.
that you take Guinness and you heat it up and you make your simple syrup out of Guinness and use that instead of just straight simple syrup. So
Right on.
I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, that's definitely one for the mixology book.
Okay, right on. That's coming, y'all. We're gonna do the Freeology mixology.
I need to do that. I can do that with some of my free time.
Yeah, it's just drink recipes and a little bit of shit talking around the drink. So
Yeah.
we can do this. It's
Yeah.
that's low hanging fruit, man.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I think it'll sell. I think it'll be popular.
So, dude, what's the topic tonight? Let's
Okay, so I wasn't with you last week, and I didn't get to watch it live, but I watched you and Maya, and I enjoyed it so much, Derrick. There's so many just good things to say, so many good comments, and of course Tommy came on,
Yep.
After, or at the end there. But I really, there were some things that she said that I really appreciated,
Mhm.
and I appreciate the way you guys interacted, and it's similar to the relationship that we've had in terms of open-mindedness and
Yep.
handling disagreements, although we agree on most things. But one of the things that she said that I really appreciated, and she didn't just say it once, but one of the things that she demonstrated was she really honored her personal experience, her personal history, her personal experience.
Yep.
And didn't allow herself to get shaken out of that because of whatever, be all kinds of reasons people do that, right?
Yep.
And I found that to be really refreshing, because oftentimes when you have these sort of theist debates, personal experience really isn't on the table. It's like not even considered an important epistemological resource.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, though, we've got to go with, our experience is all that we have.
Right.
And I so appreciate that was part of the discussion, because it's one of the things I noticed on both sides. Well, not so much with the Christians, because they're always giving their testimonies, and this was my experience, and this is how God changed my life, or, God gave me a parking spot when I prayed for it, or,
Yeah.
It's almost, a lot of it's based on, if not all of it's based on personal experience. And then in the atheist crowd, that doesn't count for a hill of beans. It's all based on logic and science and reason and and all that stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons there's such a disconnect between those two camps, is because on the Christian side, it's all experience and they're not looking at facts in a lot of cases, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then on the atheist side, it's all facts, and we just completely discount anything that's part of your personal experience. And so as I was listening to you guys, the way that was able to blend together was really amazing to me. Something I watched, and I'm not comparing you guys to this, but Tucker Carlson sat down with Chris Cuomo, and they did like a 2-hour discussion. Yeah. They had never met, and it was fascinating to watch that. I'm sure it made a lot of people angry on both sides. But one of the things they were talking about was, we don't do that anymore in this country. We don't sit down and just have conversations and try to understand one another and allow some, what's the right term? It's escaping me, but allow, I don't want to say grace. Grace isn't the right word, but allowing for differences.
Yeah, accommodating differences.
Yeah, sure. Accommodating differences is a great way to say it. And so I thought maybe for tonight, it would be fun. Sorry, I don't know where this frog in my throat came from.
Allergy season, man.
I thought it would be fun to talk about God, because one of the things I took away from the discussion last week too was this idea of talking about God or creator or the divine, or I think the word is problematic, consciousness, whatever. Being able to have a conversation about God outside of a Christian paradigm. In other words, like if you'd never read the Bible,
Yeah.
somebody who's saying, I believe in God and here's why, and they've never read the Bible.
Right.
And then also talk about how important open-mindedness is, and then it's okay to change your mind.
Yep.
It's okay to do a complete 180. You know, if you get new information, then by all means, it's okay to change your mind. And yet we seem to, on both sides of the atheist-theist debate, get very dogmatic in our thinking, at least from my experience. Yep. And so here's an analogy. So I was thinking about how to show equity in personal experience. And here's what I mean. Because, you know, you're looking at personal experience versus like science, right?
Yep.
And if you have a personal experience, that's anecdotal. And science has to have, you know, lots of repeatability in terms of, especially medicine, right? Like it's probably one of the most scienced things out there, because they start with petri dishes, and then they graduate to worms, and then they graduate to mice, and then they graduate to primates, and then before they even start human trials, right?
Right.
And then you got to have more than one human trial, and you got to have all these controls and all this stuff. So I think very well designed approach. But I had an experience on a medication about 7 or 8 years ago, and I had a really negative side effect to this medication. And my wife actually suggested, do you think it could be the medication that you're taking? So I looked up side effects on this medication, and sure enough, it did show up in, watch this, 0.02% of the group that took it reported this side effect. Now that's really statistically insignificant, 0.02%.
Yep.
And there could be confounding variables there, right? It may have nothing to do with the medication. It may have to do with some other factors that wasn't controlled for, because how do you control for every factor in a human study, right? And so the science would say, and the medicine I was taking was the go-to medication for the issue that I was having. So the science would say, I shouldn't have that side effect. But my experience was, I was having that side effect. And when I got off the medication, that side effect went away.
Yep.
So do I devalue my experience if I go to the doctor and I say, you know, I'm having this side effect? Oh, no, that's, you know, hardly anybody has that side effect. Let's look for something else. Or, and then go with the science. You see what I'm saying? I mean, my analogy is going to break down at some point, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or do I honor the science, but also my personal experience, and blending those two and bringing those two together? And then around this issue of spirituality, divinity, consciousness, things like that, find a path forward. So that's how I'm set up the conversation.
And that's really good, and I appreciate your feedback of the show. And you know, man, I have really egg-headed discussions about these kind of things, about a lot of different things. But you know, one of the things that I've learned from you, from Maya, from my sister Sandy, and there are several others, that you can't discount the value of experience, right? Because even me, now I've walked back atheism a bit, and I like to call myself now an agnostic anti-theist. That's kind of like the space that I'm in right now.
Right.
But what I've learned is that you can't discount an experience, because there's an old saying, and I don't know if you ever preached this or not when you were preaching, but I used to preach this all the time. I said that a man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with an argument.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So experience is important. The challenge is that you can't go so far with experience to say that the experience has to govern, you know, outcomes. Right. So yes, you had a reaction, but by your own admission, it was 0.002 I mean, a significantly statistically insignificant number. This is not to say that it doesn't happen,
Right.
and it doesn't invalidate your experience. Your experience is absolutely valid, and in the consideration of the science of the medicine, that your experience has to factor into that,
Hmm.
right? Because here's the thing, that even in science, right, that there, for example, gravity is something that that there are robust theories around, but you also experience gravity. You experience it in your day to day. You know that you're tethered to the earth. If you jump up, you'll come down. If you're in an airplane that's accelerating, you feel yourself pinned to the seat, right?
Yep.
Or if you're skydiving, you feel the sensation of falling. All of these things, and those are experiences. And they don't. The science does not invalidate the experience,
Right.
and the experience is germane to the science, right?
Right.
So I'm completely with you on that, and that's something that has been an area of growth for me. So so I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for Maya. Grateful for my sister Sandy and others that have helped me see that. But this is the thing about the whole God construct, and you mentioned, okay, what happens if there's no Bible, no Christianity, no religion, nothing, and so you sense you sense that there's something beyond you,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Now, remember my metric is tangibility, measurability, and repeatability,
Right.
right?
Right.
If I sense it, so if you can detect it with your senses, your five senses, or let's say your sixth sense, if you consider your third eye or spiritual sense, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Or a sensor, some kind of detection device,
Right.
now I have a tangibility. So here's the thing is that even spiritual experiences, they do have a tangibility, and you can't discount that.
Right.
And that's something that I'm learning. Um, but the problem that I have, this is my issue, right? That the measurability, right? The height, the width, the depth, the breadth, or the time consumed by an entity. Okay, how do I measure that? And then finally the repeatability, because here's the thing, like in your case, you had the experience. The medicine gave you a side effect. You got off the medicine, side effect stopped. If you got back on the medicine, then the side effect resumes, right? So now you've met the criteria for repeatability. Okay, so it's and this is a really great topic because it's really a balancing act. It's a fine line, and um, so to your point, I have walked back the whole thing about experience. I'm with experience. If you experience it, that's just like I always go back to the whole story of Carlton Pearson in the movie Come Sunday, and he said, God told me.
Right.
And this was something, Aaron, this was a pivotal point in my deconstruction. Those three words, God told me, because my thing was, okay, who is anyone to say whether God said something to you or not? Now, and hear me out, because there are some of my atheist friends that say, well, there is no God, and that God can't speak. But let's say that even if there is no God, and you have a psychosomatic experience, it's an experience nevertheless.
Hmm.
You've experienced something. You feel like you've heard something. There is something that triggers an emotional response, an intellectual response, or maybe even a physical response in you. And you can't discount that simply because, oh, well, it doesn't happen to everyone. Well, if it happens to 0.002% of people, you follow what I'm saying? It,
Yeah.
it it still has some validity, and then it has to influence, and it may not directly impact the overarching hypothesis or theory, but it definitely influences it, and you have to account for that influence. So, to your point about God without Christianity, this is what I think. Like Kyle Butler, he used to always refer to God as source.
Yeah.
right? And I can get down with that. Or like, you talk about consciousness, right? A global, or a cosmic consciousness. I can get down with that, right? Um, the challenge that I have is, okay, whether or not this should be set up as a straw man of governance,
No.
that
Yeah.
that everybody should live their life this way because I have this experience. And let me just say this real quick for those of you in the audience that are Christians and you never heard this before, that the whole theory of the rapture is fairly new on the timeline of Christianity. This came about from John Darby and some revivals that happened in the early 1800s, and some child from Scotland had a vision about this, and it was something that it was like the game of telephone. It got told to one person and another and another and another, and suddenly the whole thing about the saints being caught up in the air with Jesus gets to be a thing. Okay, so here's the deal. This girl had a dream. She had an experience. John Darby takes that and runs with it. So there is an experience. Now, is this experience, or does X uh, correlate or cause Y?
Right.
Right, and that's the thing that we have to keep in mind when we talk about this. And then the last thing, the open-mindedness, and you nailed this, man. It's like this whole topic is like it's like it's got all my neurons firing in my brain right now. um Open-mindedness is simply that, okay, if I'm confronted with new information that runs contrary to what I have been conditioned to believe, I need to either provide a filter that protects my knowledge, my prior knowledge, so that I'm not led astray, or I need to be open-minded enough where I can consider both concepts in the same construct, in the same context,
Yeah.
and then let the preponderance of evidence weigh out what is the better of the two solutions. And that better of the two solutions may be from the standpoint of empirical data, but it could be what works best for me. So anyway, this I'm loving this, man.
Yeah. So that brings up the other part, God without Christianity, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. So let me flip the analogy a different way with the medication.
Yep.
And I picked medicine not just for a reason, versus like quantum physics or just basic biology or whatever. But it would be wrong for me to, not that I would have the authority, but let's say that I did. I had this side effect on this medication. Therefore, no one else should ever take this medication. Because if you take this medication, you're going to have this.
Exactly.
And so it's that issue of governance, right? And so in science, medical science, at least specifically, there's an authority. There's an appeal to authority, right? And it's not just your doctor. If you've got a good doctor, they've kept up with the science on whatever it is. If they're a family practice doctor, I hope they've kept up with the latest blood pressure medicines and interventions, and they're not just going off of something they learned in a class 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because there's an authority, there's a governance with that. There's the FDA, right? So the authority for how everyone else should relate to this aspect of their lives should be science. In other words, I shouldn't take a medicine. This is what drives me nuts about the supplement. And I take supplements. I believe in supplements. Don't anybody out there get upset with me or offended. I'm probably, as I age, leaning more and more towards like diet and exercise and holistic medicine and stuff like that. But, just because somebody does well on a supplement, what are the studies that support benefits? Or just because somebody's out there wearing a surgical uniform on YouTube and talking about whatever, like where's the science that governs that? You see what I'm saying? And so I think that we can make some mistakes when we push holistic cures because they worked for us. It's almost the same thing as religion, right? Whereas medicine is different. So I think when you're talking about something that ought to, I almost want to say, like, govern the public's relationship to
Right.
whatever it is, because you always
Right.
have a choice to take the medicine or not take the medicine. You can
Right.
always deny treatment, right?
Hmm.
Um, but you should have a firm foundation of measurability, tangibility, measurability, and repeatability
Yep.
in order to do that. So herein lies the problem with God and Christianity, because what happens with Christianity, we know who God is because he wrote us a book, right?
Right.
We know who God is. We know what God thinks. If we can get past that step that, yes, there is a God, well, then who is this God? What's he like? How does he think? Well, the Bible tells me so, right?
Yep.
Learn that as children, right? And
Yep.
it's a moral religion. It's interested in governing human behavior.
Right.
The whole thing. I mean, from at least Moses getting the law, right?
Yep.
It's all about governing human behavior. And I guess what I'm suggesting is, what if we were able to conceptualize a creator without governance,
Hmm.
without, this is going to sound terrible, but I want to say it anyway, without morality. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I mean, I realize where I'm stepping, right?
But dude, I like where you're going with this. Keep going.
That then if I have an experience with that being, entity, whatever it is, or you have an experience or you don't have an experience, and I'm just speaking universally when I say
Hmm.
um, then it's okay. Like there's no need to force or impose any kind of morality on society.
Hmm.
And we can gather our morality from ethics, which I think is a better way to do it anyway. Like, how do we live together successfully as a society?
Hmm.
How do we live together effectively? And that's where I think love does come in. That's where I think compassion does come in. We're
Yeah.
going to be a much better society if we're loving and compassionate than we are going to be if it is what we have now, which is still just basically an evolutionary model
Hmm.
that has AIs and cars and guns and money and economic systems and power brokers. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, but I think it's so hard for people to even conceptualize an idea of God that isn't like what we've seen in the Abrahamic religions in the West. That you have to have a, how long we've been going, like a half hour.
Yep.
You have to have a half hour preamble to even get into the conversation.
Yeah. And I want to touch on something too, like the what they call the Sumerian Anunnaki theory,
Yeah.
right? And so the Anunnaki were not particularly benevolent, nor were they particularly malevolent. They were flawed beings, just like us, and they ostensibly created humanity. They created it one way and said, "Oops, that was fucked up. Let me go back and reboot this thing." And then they did it. And they said, "Okay, now we're tracking. We're on a better path." And and so if we exclude morality, if we take morality out of the equation and we say, okay, let's just ask the question. If I were to create beings beneath me,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
How would I want them to behave? What would be my hopes, my dreams for them? And it would not necessarily be to impose my morality on them. It would be simply, okay, I've created these beings, I've created an environment, I've created some parameters. Now take everything that I've given you and build it out, right? And it would be, okay, now here's where free will comes in, right? Because you might be better than me morally. You might be better than me emotionally. My creation. You might be better, you know. And then again, you might be fucked up. You might you might just go in and destroy the whole thing. I mean, you might create a utopia or you might create a dystopia. Okay, and that's um, so again, what you're saying when you say taking the morality out of it, and we say, okay, is there a creative source, a creative influence, a prime mover? Okay, if I say that is possible, then I can get down with that if you extract the morality from it.
Mhm.
Because so you were talking about ethics, being governed by ethics instead of morals, and I'm with that too, right? Um, because here's the thing: like morals are absolute. They're either they're it's binary, it's one or zero, it's on or it's off, right? But ethics are a little bit different because even and Maya, she's watching and she could correct me if I'm wrong, but in the law there's a thing called situational ethics that the ethic that may apply to this situation doesn't apply to this situation, and so now you have different situations in which or situations that influence decision making, and I'm okay with that. All of those things are okay. It's when you get to these moral absolutes and you say, well, God is holy, be ye holy for I am holy. you know God is a consuming fire. God sees every evil thing, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, I don't know if I can't really wrap my mind or my emotional framework around that.
Mhm.
So anyway, I just had to jump in and say that, man.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. And again, that's why it's like if you strip the Bible away and you say, like, because I mean, I'm an atheist in the sense that I do not believe in the God of the Bible,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Um, I guess I would be agnostic theist if I were to categorize myself, because then if you strip away all the knowledge that we have from books, then there is an element of Gnosticism. I'm sorry, not Gnosticism, agnosticism there,
Yeah.
because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
I think it's healthy to have agnosticism no matter where you're at.
Yep.
Then which comes back to open-mindedness, right? But
Yep.
I want to speak to something also though about when you're talking about tangibility. And I love that you said, if I have any kind of an experience, whether it's with my five physical senses or whether it's, uh, some sort of a sixth sense, third eye type.
Yeah. Or a mechanical sensor even.
Right,
Yep.
right. That it becomes tangible, right?
Yep.
Where we get hung up on this is measurable. But this is also where psychology has a problem. Where psychology is today is really interesting to me because it used to be part of the humanities.
Mhm.
So it'd be in there with literature and
Philosophy.
philosophy and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
So it's a completely different category. But yet we still treat mental health conditions.
Which
And
is science.
what's that?
That's science. When you
It,
start
well,
treating them in a mental condition.
here's how it is science though, because it is and it isn't. It's kind of it's its own thing in my opinion, because I cannot I can taste this. I've used this illustration a lot.
Hmm.
And I can have an experience of what that's like for me. And that experience cannot be, it's very tangible, it's very repeatable, but the experience itself is not measurable. What the way the flavor hits me, in other words. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Everything else about it's measurable, but the actual experience of it is not measurable. So this is a problem that psychiatry and psychology has. And I'm going to put psychiatry in there too, because it depends 1,000% on self-reporting.
Mm.
1,000%. Every psychological study, every psychiatric study, because you can go into like the physician's desk reference, or probably do it online at drugs.com or something, and you can look up any SSRI, which is usually what they give for depression, right?
Yeah.
And in almost every case, if not every case, I don't want to say every case because I'm not sure, but in almost every case, it will say mechanism unknown.
Mm.
In other words, we have no clue why this works. We cannot tell you when you take this pill what it does to your brain to make you feel better.
Right.
So then how do we know, how does it get through, all the FDA trials? Well, because you self-report where you're at on the depression scale.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning,
Yep.
you start taking the medicine after a length of time, you self-report how you're feeling.
Yep.
So what's measurable about it is not what's actually happening and taking place. What's measurable about it is the effect that it's having.
Right.
And I think that same paradigm can be brought into spirituality, can be brought into metaphysics,
Mm-hmm.
where if I meditate and I focus on a divine name,
Yeah.
or Om,
Om.
right?
Yep.
And after 6 months of meditating, I have this experience. It could be whatever, it could be a Kundalini awakening. I feel electricity flowing through my body.
Yeah.
And I share that's all self-reported. And if I share that with enough people, and let's say I start a meditation on this divine name, it could be anything. It could be anything. But we're just going to chant this divine name over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
It could be Obi-Wan Kenobi for all the relevance that it has.
Yeah.
And I do that with 500 people, and 75% of them experience a self-reported sort of Kundalini awakening.
Yeah.
So it's different. And this goes back to the point of appeal to authority and governance. If God spoke to me, and there's one God, and he created everything, or she created everything and put everything in its proper order, then I have the authority to settle the matter. Right. And I don't think we should approach it like that.
No.
Or if I could say, yeah, yes, what you're saying about the rapture is true, but 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, Matthew 24, Book of Revelation, so the Bible says, I don't believe this, I don't believe this. The Bible says there is going to be a rapture, case closed. That's where I think the problem is, really. I don't think it's so much, is there a God, isn't there a God, the fight over it. I think it's, we don't want, just because you believe these things, or you have these experiences, or you have this book, does not give you the authority to impose your experiences, your beliefs, your book, your religion on everybody else.
Right. And that Aaron, that's the thing. That to me, that's the pivot, right? Your experience is absolutely valid.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely valid. But your experience is not sufficient enough to erect a governance around me.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about God, from if we were to separate God from the concept of morality, now we have something, I think a framework with which, let's say, that's universally applicable. It may not be one size fits all, but it's close, right? It's not going to fit everyone like a tailored suit, but everybody can basically put this on and wear it. And the challenge is that if I have this experience, this experience is absolutely valid to me, and therefore it is valid, period.
Right.
Nobody can take this experience away from me. No one can discount this experience, but I do not have the right to impose my experience
Right.
as a provenance for governance, right?
I love that.
So, so this, I want to explore the whole open mind category, because
let's do it.
I'm going to share a story. And I've told you this story many times before. I don't know how many in the audience have heard this, but about 6 or 7 years ago, my good friend Simon Yap and I had a disagreement. because at that time I'm still preaching the gospel, and I'm still preaching the gospel of grace, and but I'm also preaching the gospel of the kingdom. And it said in Matthew 24:14, it said, and this gospel of the kingdom must be preached to all the nations, and then the end will come.
Hmm.
Right? So Simon, being a preterist, he took umbrage with what I said, and he was very, very vocal about that. And Simon said, "Derrick, you're full of shit." That's exactly what he said. You're full of shit. You know, the end times that are they're prophesied in the Bible, they already came, because that's the preterist
Right.
viewpoint,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And Simon got so pissed off with me that he blocked me. Now, to put this in perspective, I've been on Facebook now since 2009. I became Facebook friends with Simon in 2009.
Okay.
You know, you go back like say 7 years, we're talking about, you know, 2017, you know, in 2017, actually it was about 2016, Simon had this issue with me and he blocked me. So then a mutual friend of ours stepped in and said, okay, you know, you guys really aren't far apart. You guys should kiss and make up. Now it's funny that Simon and I have both blocked this guy now, but Simon and I did kiss and make up, and what happened was I began to listen to what he was saying, because I realized that I had closed myself off to the whole preterist argument. I just simply refused to hear it. But this time, you know, I said, Simon, I want to hear you, and we talked. We talked a lot. And on my path to inclusionism and later universalism and later atheism, um, that was instrumental in opening my mind to listening to new things regarding Christianity,
Yeah.
because I recognized at that point that number one, I don't know it all, which I knew, I already knew that. But the second thing is that there are different facets of Christianity that are considered to be heretical. They're considered to be apostate. But if I'm going to be intellectually honest about my Christianity, then I have to be open-minded enough to hear these other voices, and to juxtapose those with what I know, and to make the determination whether or not my viewpoint is correct, or is there something else? Am I missing something? And so this open-mindedness, it was a growth opportunity for me. And then, you know, taking that a step forward, and you know, like meeting Aaron Abkey, and then you and I connecting, and then I realized, okay, the more I learn, the more I realize I didn't know.
Right.
The more I learn, the more I realize that I needed to learn. I need to, and this, the whole thing about spirituality or metaphysics or mysticism, you know, whatever you want to call it, that it is, what do they call it, kanban in Japanese, that it's repeatable. You have to do it, it's an iterative process. You have to do it over and over and over again to get better at it, right?
Mhm.
It's
Right.
like, you know, perfect practice makes perfect results.
Right.
So you have to do this over and over again. So what happened was is that you know, I began to look at things that I had considered to be heretical. I started meeting with some folks in Phoenix. It was a group of inclusionists and universalists. And when they first invited me to come out and meet with them, I'm like, I enjoyed the company, but I'm like, holy fuck, these guys are really out here on the fringe, right? But the more I listened, the more I said, you know, they're kind of onto something. And then I began to look at it. I said, okay, if God knows everything, he can't, if God knows everything, and he's like the God of the Calvinists that says some are elected to, you know, to salvation and others to perdition. That's a fucked up God.
Hmm.
You know, I can't comprehend that. But if you say, okay, you know, everybody's born, everybody's going to go through shit, but in the end everybody's going to be reconciled, and that to me was a better interpretation. But if I were not open-minded, I couldn't have got to that.
Right.
And so there are two things I'm going to throw out, and I'm going to kick it back to you.
Sure.
Is that there are two things about your thinking. One, and it all comes down to something called neuroplasticity, right? You have to be flexible enough. That means you have to be bendable, pliable, shapeable in your thinking. That your thinking has to have a reasonable amount of plasticity. but you also have to be agile. You have to have some mental agility. In other words, like if you're out on the football field, like the greatest running backs in the history of the NFL or the greatest point guards in the history of the NBA, or like the greatest shortstops in the history of baseball, these guys all had an agility. They were able to change directions and adapt to changing conditions based on what they're faced with. And it was that agility that made them great. So you have to have this flexibility, this bendability, this pliability that you can, that you can adapt. As Bruce Lee said, be like water, right? But you also have to be agile. You have to be able to move around. And I saw in the comments that one of my martial arts sifus is out here, Josh Bowerman, in Arkansas, and Josh was a big proponent on agility. He was like, if you don't know how to move your feet, if you don't know how to move your hands, if you don't know how to move your body to adapt to the threat that you're being faced with, you're going to get owned. You're going to get your ass handed to you 100% of the time. And this is a lesson that I learned from him. Right. So I've learned to be agile, not just in my physical being, but also in my mental and my spiritual being. So that's where I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, I think that I would call that growth though too, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the other thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, I I could turn on Kenneth Copeland, for example.
Mhm.
I don't even know if he's still on, but
Oh, he's still on, sadly, but yeah.
I can tell you what he's going to preach because my guess is he's preaching exactly the same thing that he was preaching in the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
And that is held up as faithful. I'm faithful to the revelation. I'm holding true and holding fast to the faith once for all delivered to the saints, or however that goes, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's why it's like God is just like being in the upside down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like, like all that says is there's been no change, no growth, no maturity
Yeah.
of your views of you know where you're at, and how is that possibly a good thing for anybody?
Right.
Case closed. I've settled it. Um, you know, God said it. I believe it. That settles it.
Yep. Exactly. I was thinking the exact same thing.
And so, where's the growth? Where, I mean, how do you? But they'll talk about it. See, this is what makes it so twisted. I need to grow my spirit. I need to grow spiritual growth. The Bible talks about going from a babe to a son to a father, right? To
Hmm.
maturity. Let us not keep laying again the same foundation. Hebrews 6 says, let us press on to maturity. And yet, in today's iteration of what we have, you just don't see that.
No.
And not only do you not see that, but there is no space for a conversation with a Simon Yap, right?
Yep.
There is no space for a conversation about universalism if you believe in the Calvinist version of God. There is no space for trying to think what's the Arminians, were incredibly legalistic, and that's where the whole holiness movement came out of. The Pentecostal movement didn't come from the Calvinist movement. The Pentecostal movement came from the really more the Arminian camp, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how you have this outgrowth of holiness. So on the one hand, you got a God who predetermines whether you're going to heaven or hell. And on the other hand, you have a God that's going to send a woman to hell if she wears makeup and cuts her hair.
Yeah. And there you go.
I mean, it's just crazy insane. And so that's why I just, wanted to play with this idea of, I just wonder what it would be like. like my hope for humanity, because I am a spiritual person, I do consider myself a mystic. I don't think that part will ever go away.
Yep.
I think it's always going to be with us, at least for the next several centuries, I would guess. But I would really like to postulate and introduce the ideas that you can have spirituality without having duality of good and evil, because that's the other problem we get into.
Yep.
So people say, well, I have spirituality, I have God without religion, I have spirituality, not religion. I'm in the New Age movement, but I also believe there are dark lizard aliens that are controlling the planet,
Yeah.
and I'm, trying to be all light and life, and you're or love and light and whatever, and you're still creating the same problem. You're still doing this. I'm right, you're wrong, or I'm right and somebody else is wrong. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it still has that governance because of the dualism in the worldview.
And this is the thing. I think that spirituality, right? And this is something that I've learned too, Aaron, is that um, I remember my mom and I had this discussion, and you know, you hate to have these discussions when you hear your one parent say you're just like your other parent, right? And my mom would say, well, you're just like your dad. You just everything is black and white to you, and that was her interpretation of my interpretation of things. And when she said that, I was offended. I was offended. But when I look back on it, Mom, if you're watching, you were right. You were right. Okay. I gotta concede, Mom, you were right. If you were watching, you were right. That basically things, it's not black or white. It's not on or off. It's more like a rheostat than a switch. A rheostat, like a dimmer switch, right? You slide it up and down, and you have infinite numbers of values of light that you can produce from this scale. And that's really what it is. And I think that and Aaron, this is something I love about you. In that your teaching on mysticism teaches that sliding scale. You know that you can be pretty much anywhere on this path, and what your experience is at any point on the scale is going to be right and relevant to you. And that's the one thing. If I wanted to say, if there's a takeaway about, like, if we say, okay, God without Christianity or God without religion, that the interpretation of God is not binary. It's not
Right.
on or off. It is a sliding scale, and it impacts everyone differently. Everyone's interpretation, and so let me say this, because I'm going to say something now that's probably going to get me in a lot of trouble with a lot of atheists, and it's this. Um, in Christianity, you have 42,000 denominations. And I'm on the record as saying, well, if there are 42,000 denominations, which one is the right one?
Right.
Right? And that's a big meaty fastball coming across the plate. It's easy to take a swing at that and make it like Babe Ruth and point to center field.
Mhm.
Easy to do that, right? But it's not actually true, because each one of these flavors appeals to people or manifests things in people differently. So, and now, so let me say this: the part of the reason why I will never go back to Christianity is because of that sliding scale, or because of that disparity between denominations. However, what I won't do anymore is deride anyone because they happen to follow any of those denominational camps, because that if you have some experience based on this particular information, your experience is valid. But again, to go back to what we were saying earlier, and to stay consistent and to be intellectually honest, is that, okay, you can have the experience. A man with an experience is not at the mercy of a man with an argument. Great. but you don't have the right to stand up your experience as the de facto or de jure authority by which everyone must govern their lives. And
Yeah.
that's really what it is. So and again, you can't let me say this to kind of dovetail all of this together, is that if you don't have an open mind, if you're not approaching this with an open mind, then what happens is that wherever your experience falls, that is going to be the linchpin of your dogma.
Hmm.
And now this is going to be where you're coming from, and everything that you think of philosophically, ideologically, spiritually, intellectually, it's going to hinge on this, right? But if you say, okay, I know that I don't know. um Man, God, Bruce Lee has a really good quote about this. It says, he that knows not and does not know he knows not, he is asleep, awaken him. He who knows not and knows he
Knows he knows not.
and knows he knows not. Um, God, I can't remember it now. I need to find that. Josh, I know you're out there, man. If you can remember that Bruce Lee quote, because you were really good with this kind of shit,
Here,
put it in the chat.
here's what I like. I like the nuance in this discussion, and I wish there was more of this kind of an approach um, in this whole arena. Now, you and I both went pretty scorched earth on people um, about religion,
Yep, yep,
But if I'm honest, for me, and I'm only speaking for myself, mine was experiential more than it was intellectual. The intellectual part came later.
well,
Um,
see, I'm exactly the opposite. Mine was intellectual, but now I'm coming around to seeing, the experiential.
yeah. So what I did was I took my experience. I was traumatized, and I do think there's a lot of traumatic crap in Christianity and in the Bible, and clearly there is because so many people resonated with it. But I took my experience, right, and said we got to get rid of all of it. We got to burn it all to the ground. It's all garbage. And then I got frustrated with the uh, lack of biblical integrity among teachers, right? They're like I did that thing on, God's love is not unconditional. And there's no place in the Bible where it teaches unconditional love, right? So if we say God's love is unconditional, we're basing it on the Bible, we're just flat lying. The truth is the Bible itself is multivocal. There are many different views about subjects and topics and God and ideas, and it's put together in a library of various people's experiences and ideas and thoughts around God. So there never was this is it, this book settles it. That thing that just doesn't even exist. But I think you bring up a really valid point in that if something works for somebody,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? And like there's three kinds of people in the world, right? There's like people who want to do total self-sacrifice and help other people, and they're great. There's also people that don't want to do anything for other people and they just want to help themselves. Absolutely fine. Perfectly fine, no problem. But there's a third kind of people that they want to do something to help themselves at the expense of everybody else.
Right.
That's a problem.
That's the problem.
So if we can keep it within the context of, I think it was your friend Josh that said, you do you, to each their own kind of a thing.
Yep.
And as long as it's not affecting how we are relating to one another ethically, I think we should be okay with that. And I think it is unethical at this point to try to take away from somebody or
Mhm.
persuade somebody off of something that is really beneficial to them and helpful to them.
Right.
And it's not hurting anybody else.
Yep. Well, let me extend that a little bit, Aaron. Not just hurting, but harming.
Yeah, harming. Yeah,
'Cause we,
exactly.
we talked about the difference between hurt and harm,
Right,
and
right.
that's a big one. Because I can say something, like if I call you a motherfucker, right, that hurts, right. But if I say all
Right.
motherfuckers like you should die, then I've said something harmful, and that's the difference. So But yeah, so to your point, like this is the thing that I'm learning. Me personally, if I say just me personally, my personal beliefs, I believe the world would be better off without religion. That's me.
Right.
If spirituality, mysticism, shamanism, I'm cool with all of that. Religion, I think, is bullshit. But if this religion helps you, if it helps you, great. As long as you don't try to impress or impose your religious beliefs on me, and we're good. Because now, if you believe something and that works for you, and it doesn't harm anyone, you should be free to believe or practice whatever it is that you do.
Yeah. So again, it's an issue of governance more. So I think the problem, let me say it this way, the problem that needs to be addressed is the issue of governance, not the issue of existence or non-existence. I think going at God exists or God doesn't exist is to lay the foundation or framework to get to the higher level of governance.
Yeah.
So if God exists, then I can govern you. And then the pushback is, well, you can't govern me with that because God doesn't even exist.
Right.
And I think a more nuanced conversation would be around how we understand social governance
Right.
and the role that religion or spirituality or mysticism or atheism or science or any of those things play in how we relate to one another and how the social constructs determine how we as a society conduct ourselves. And I think
So
that would be I think that would be a healthier and more productive conversation. And I think you could get people to sit down at the table instead of just kind of being in an echo chamber, Christians talking to Christians, atheists talking to atheists, that kind of stuff.
so to your point, if religion makes me a better person,
Right.
if my religious beliefs make me a better person, and I take my better person and introduce that into the public fray, absent my religion, just my expression of my better
Yes.
self, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, what you're saying is that, okay, uh, I'm expressing my better self as a tool or an implement to improve the human condition, but it's not my religion that I'm trying to share with the world. I'm simply trying to express my best authentic self into the world.
Yes.
And this just happens to be something that influences it. So and if you do that, you take proselytization out of it,
Yep.
you know, you take dogma out of it, and you just simply say, okay, I'm a better person. So let me go back to this, and I'm picking on Josh tonight. Josh called me earlier today, and I wasn't able to take the call, so I'm picking on him. But like we, Josh and I studied the Warriors Way under Josh and Brad Garrison. Okay, and the Warriors Way made me a better person.
Mm.
It has improved my thinking, my physical being, my spiritual being. It has improved me in many different ways. And Josh, you had a major impact on that. And I love you and I'm grateful for that. But if I go in and say, everybody should study the Warrior's Way because this is the way that you get better,
Such a great example, Derrick.
now I've erred, right? Because what I'm doing, what I really want to do is I want to express my best authentic self into the realm of humanity for the betterment of humanity, irrespective of what I believe. How I get to my best authentic self is not really important. It's that now I'm fully formed. I have my spiritual side, fully formed. My intellectual side fully formed. My physical side fully formed. And now I'm taking this into the realm of ideas, and I'm saying, okay, these are the things that I think will help humanity.
Let me just nuance it. I know we got to go because we need to
Okay.
keep it to an hour. But yes, 1,000% yes. And you were taught a path by Josh, right?
Yep.
And so we shouldn't, on the flip side of that, we shouldn't also say all teaching of those paths are right, bad and wrong. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
you couldn't have become your better self if there wasn't someone out there that had followed that path and could teach it to you. And then
Right.
if there was someone like me that came along, if let's say I was 30, 40 years younger, And I'd be like, Derrick, I see the results in your life, and I would like to learn about that. And you say, well, let me teach you about the warrior's way, and then I
Mhm.
can study under you and follow that path.
Right.
That's where I think the sweet spot is.
Yeah. And that's the the proper mentor protege type of relationship. In other words, I'm not trying to build a student base simply because I'm trying to convince everybody that this is the way. I'm just saying, okay, you come to me, you see something in me, and you say, hey, can you help me develop this? Right? Can you help me become fully formed? And so what I look at, like when you're doing your Sunday show, is that a lot of people are coming to hear you speak because you're not trying to convince them to go a particular way or to embrace a certain path. You're just saying, okay, these are things that I've experienced. These are things that I've expressed, and here are the fruits of this. And if you're interested in this, I can show you what I know.
Yep,
Right. And so the other thing too is that man, if we can get our fucking egos out of the way, right?
exactly. That's
And
the
and
thing.
and and that's what I love about you is that you're not sitting up there saying, okay, follow me because I'm the guy. I'm the guru. I'm the way. I know what it is, right? And then people like Josh and Brad, that I studied under, these guys never said that this is the way. Like, okay, let me back up for a second. Josh, I'm picking on you tonight, man. Like we used to go in the dojo 2 nights every week, and these were what Brad called private school. And private school was this: these were people that they were beyond what the average martial arts students would get. They're looking at this as a holistic approach to living. So one of the things that Josh and Brad used to always say is that, okay, like we would study things. We would study Muay Thai. We'd study Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. We'd study Jeet Kune Do and Panatukan and Kali, and we're studying all these different things. But the point was is that what Brad and Josh would say is that, okay, these things may not work for you individually, but you need to understand how they work, understand the mechanics of them. But what you do is embrace what works for you. If you can express these three different particular disciplines, you're going to be successful. If you can express these effectively, repeatedly, over and over again, but you still need to know about these other things because it's good to be broad in your knowledge. But what you do is you embrace and manifest those things that actually work for you. See, and that's the challenge here is that when we look at God, right? How does God influence or impact my life?
Right.
Not how can I impress the world with my knowledge of God or
Exactly.
or draw people into my practice of God, but or if I say like no God, because I see Jimmy Ligon is on here, and I, I'm following the way of no God. Okay, fine. As long as the end result is that whatever it is that I'm doing leads me to my best authentic self. And this best authentic self, I'm able to express and manifest this in such a way that I am a value add to the human, community. Now I've done well. The problem is that if I come into this with, okay, this works for me, therefore this is right.
Right.
This works for me, therefore this is the way.
Right.
That is, you can't do that. And when you do that, that's where religion comes in. See, if we act on individual spirituality or individual lack of spirituality, and we say, okay, this is what works for me, I'm a better person for it. Now I'm going to share some things. I'm going to not even share some things, not share ideology, not share philosophy, not share theology, but I'm sharing myself, my best authentic self, and submitting that. as a gift to humanity or a benefit or a value add to humanity, if I can get to that, then I've done well.
Yep. I think that's a good place to land the plane. I
Well,
think that's great.
I gotta share this this quote because this is the quote that I was looking for. This is from Bruce Lee, from the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and it said, "He who knows not." Let me put my glasses on because I'm trying to be vain today, trying to be pretty. Uh, he who knows not, he knows not. He's a fool. Shun him. He who knows not, and he knows not, he is simple, teach him. He who knows and knows not that he knows, he is asleep, awaken him. But he who knows and knows that he knows, he is wise, follow him. And that to me is a great way of approaching it because when you look at people, there are some people that they think they know, but when you really double click into what they're saying, you realize no, they don't know.
Mm.
Or there are people that they don't know and they're intellectually honest about it. Fuck, dude, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so that's an intellectually honest answer. But it's like the guy who comes in and and he knows that he knows, and he's able to demonstrate. See, and that's the thing. Being able to demonstrate is, oh my God, that is so key because people will talk about and martial arts is really a very good venue for this because there are all of these people out here that they say, okay, this is the way, this is the path. If you learn this, you'll be able to whip anybody and all of that. No, it doesn't work that way. But if you say, okay, that here are a set of situations or here are a set of parameters, and if you can understand how to operate within these parameters, you can develop the agility, the flexibility, the open-mindedness, and if you can do these things, now you might be able to mount an effective defense, or you might be able to mount an effective counterattack against these things. That's where we want to be. We want to be in a place where we're agile, where we're flexible, where we're open-minded, and if we can get to this, right? I don't care whether you are someone who believes in God, you're a theist, or if you're an anti-theist, or if you're atheist. If we can get to this and just say, this is something that works for me. This
Yep.
worked for me, and if we can get to that, dude, I think that's world changing.
Yep.
That's where I'll stop.
Yeah. I'm just going to go ahead and read. Josh put a comment there. He said, to stay with the martial arts comments, religion should be dealt with in the same way. When you learn a new technique and practice it diligently, you spar and see if it holds up under the pressure of actual conflict. If it doesn't, throw it out.
Josh, you said that perfectly.
Yeah. So I'm going to, since I opened, I get to bring it to a close, right?
Yes, sir.
And you usually let me do the closing. So tonight I'm going to let you do the closing.
All right.
But, thanks everybody for watching. Great comments, great engagement. Let us know what you thought of these kinds of conversations. And go ahead, Derrick.
Yeah, and like and subscribe to this stuff, and make sure you check out Aaron on Sunday mornings. He does a Sunday morning live. He does a Monday evening live. Make sure you catch that because again, if you want to understand metaphysical principles, mystical principles without the religious bullshit, this is the guy. I'm telling you, he's the guy. And then I do a Sunday morning where I talk about practical things that impact your lives.
Yep.
Check this stuff out. Watch it, like it, subscribe to it, because this is like, here's the thing. Aaron and I are not trying to do any of this to get rich. we're doing this. Well, okay.
No, I'm saying no. We do this. It's freeology, everybody.
It's freeology.
It's freeology
Exactly.
Friday.
It's free. It's free, y'all. But anyway, that being said, thank you for attending our TED Talk tonight. We want you to all be happy, be well, and be filled with peace and hair grease.
I like that.
All right. Love you, Aaron.
Love
And
you,
I'll
Derrick.
talk to you in a few, and all of you guys. Josh, look for a call from me tomorrow. I got kind of caught up today, but I'm not I'm not dissing you, man. You're one of my favorite people in the world, and I love you, and I appreciate all of that you poured into my life, and I never forget it. And Aaron, same with you.
Yep.
So,
Give me a holler when you're ready.
all right,
All
love
right.
you guys. Peace.